Testing. Well, hello, amigas, and welcome to Amiga Handle Your Shit podcast. I'm excited for today's episode. I have a beautiful friend, amiga. I just met her and I fell in love with her, and she is going to mesmerize you. Her name is Diana Hernandez Wayne, and she has an incredible story. And what I really enjoyed about her was this ease and grace, despite everything that she's been through. And another thing as well was that on her Instagram, I mean, she says, she helps you heal your shit. So, amiga, handle your shit. I mean, come on. Like, you can write this stuff, So I'm so excited to have her here. She helps you to create your own rules and live a dream that you can never even think of, because it is so magnificent, and she will help you create that life. So my beautiful friend here, she is a life and loss coach. And but before that, she was in the e-commerce world, and she was a director at Method Products, and she has her calling, and she's been creating programs, and I'm so excited for her to share what she's done and how she can be there to support you and in your new life, because we all have a new life to create, especially nowadays. There's so much grief out there. And, without further ado, we want to have her come on. And I mean, I can't wait for you all to get to know her. So without further ado, this is Diana Hernandez Wayne. Hello, amigas, and welcome to Amiga Handle Your Shit podcast. I am so excited to have this beautiful soul in front of me. Oh my God, she's got such a story, and I can't wait for you all to experience her. OMG. Okay, so she is not only an amazing person. I had the privilege of meeting her a couple of days ago, but her story really resonates with me. And I'm sure it's going to resonate with all of you out there, amigas, because there is a point in our lives that we will all experience grief, all of us. And her story is like epic in the way that what happened, what unfolded, taught her so many things, and at the same time allowed her to grow. And now she's a life coach extraordinaire. I can't even, the things that she has done. I mean, I just need to get right into it because it's extraordinary, and I know that you're gonna love her story. So welcome, Diana. Welcome to Amiga Handle Your Shit podcast. So I'm excited. So so that the amigas out there can get to know a little bit about you. Why don't you give us a little history about you and your family? Where are you from? Yes. I know you're Latina, but there's more to it than that.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be on this podcast. I love it. I was just immediately like, yes, I'm so excited. So just excited to be here. Let me start with, I would say, stage 1 of my life. Then I'll shift into stage 2 and where I currently feel that I'm living, which is stage 3. And stage 2 is really the grief. So stage 1 is my family is immigrants from El Salvador. They came in the early 80s and they arrived in Houston, Texas, which is where I was born. I'm the youngest of 4 girls. And, it was a immigrant, work hard, push hard, do the best you can mindset. And growing up, I got very close to my sisters because my parents were working. And from an emotional support, my sisters were really there. The oldest sister is 8 years older, and then there's 4 of us. So we were pretty close in ages. And it was just like bam, 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 back to back, right? So in growing up in Houston, I grew up surprisingly in a really decent neighborhood, very diverse, and just had a lot of great experiences. And when I graduated high school, my sisters had started to go to college, but they were working full time, stopping and going. And I decided that I also wanted to go to college. And going to college was the thing, right? Like, you made it as an immigrant family, you made it. Like, that's the whole sacrifice, is to go to college, right? That's why they leave their country. That's why they come here to the US to really help promote an advancement. And that was my thing. So I had no idea about career planning. I had no idea about life planning, much less. And I did a non-traditional way of deciding, okay, I don't like maths. I won't major in maths or sciences. I don't like to write too much. So even though I love to write now, but I don't want to major in literature. So I decided for business. And I thought business would be a good avenue to always have that secure job. And if you're seeing me, I'm like air coding that secure job, because that's part of like clearly what happens into chapter 3 of my life, volume 3, of where realizing that wasn't for me. So needless to say, I accomplished the dream. I graduate college. I graduate with top honors. I get a job out of college doing public accounting, and the whole works. I even got an offer to move to San Francisco, and it was like, ya llegó, like I had just made, I don't think I ever saw my parents so happy and emotional until the day of my graduation of college. So that was a really great point. So that's chapter 1. I go to college, I graduate, I move to San Francisco. In San Francisco, I'm doing this job. This is volume 2. I'm doing this job, and I don't know if you've ever, I mean, Jackie, as a lawyer, you bill hours. It's all about the hours, billing the hours and the grind. And I was just miserable. And I remember I did that for 3 years. And I remember thinking, I had a boyfriend at the time, and I told him, gosh, I hate this job so much. I sometimes wish I would get into a car accident. Like, the words you say when you're so depressed and you don't realize how soul sucking those jobs.
Yes. Oh my God. Okay, that resonates with me. Because there was at a point in my life too, I was like, I fucking hate my job.
Yes.
I kept saying that. I'm like, I am miserable. This is not making me happy. Why? Yeah. But because you're first generation, Latin American, you're doing this because your family said, no, this is the way, this is the American dream. And so you go and you get it done. And then you're like, shit.
I'm supposed to have a ride. Why do I hate this so much?
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was real. That was very real.
Oh my God. Yes. So tell us, okay, so you're like telling the universe you hate it, get me into a car accident.
Oh, wishing horrible things, right? Like the power of language, like, we'll come back to that piece of what I learned. It was 2000, late 2008, 2009, before the current pandemic, financial crisis. And I still decide I need to get out of this. So that was great. I get out, I put my resume out there. The universe supports me. I get a job quickly within 6 weeks that I decided I'm done, and I get a job. It was wonderful. And it was still in finance, and I realized I still hate it. And so at that point I decided I'm going to change careers. I really have to, I have to do something. This is my life. But keep in mind, I had gone to college for 5 years because I got a bachelor's and master's in accounting. And at that point I had already worked 4 years in finance. So there was this, it's funny now because we have the gift of being older and looking back. But at that point, it seemed like half of my life had been in this making of this career, and I was going to switch it completely. But I did come to terms that I had to let that go, and I had to step into something I love. And at that point, I was really picking up that I love, at the company I worked for, it was which was a Fortune 500 company, big marketing firm and sales organization. I started to really network and get myself out there to discover what potentially could I do. And I realized I was interested in marketing, and an opportunity came to join a team in sales. So the reason I say this is, there's that intuition. I don't know if you felt that before, but that intuition that says like, this isn't for you. This isn't what you're here to do. And I'm so grateful I started to make those connections to change. So I changed careers a week after I moved career. Like, finally, I think I made it, right? I think I'm making
yeah, I have arrived. I have arrived.
I have arrived. A week after, I get a call from my sister saying that my second oldest sister, Karen, had been taken to the ER, that she had lost weight, 20 pounds significantly over the last week, and they didn't know what was wrong, and they had taken her to the ER, and that they would keep me posted. And I was like, okay. And my thought was like, okay, that's really weird, but that was the thought. That's very weird. So a day later, we're checking in. A day later, they call to tell me that the doctors have diagnosed that she has stage 4 gastritic cancer, which is stomach cancer. And I just remember thinking like, what? How does a family member have cancer? We had not had anybody pass away or had any type of illness prior. I mean, my great grandmother lived to like 102. So it was such a shock. And this is where, despite that shock, I knew I had to go back and be in Houston, and I was supported by the universe. The boss that had hired me into sales was like Puerto Rican, my mentor, and he said, Diana, the most important thing is familia. You go. And I dropped everything and I went to Houston for 2 weeks. Mind you, my sister was let go from the hospital because she didn't have insurance. This is 2008, 2009. She had lost her job like a few months earlier. And so it was not just her diagnosis, but what to do in these panic areas where insurance is real, right? We live in America. America operates on insurance. And so it was quite a turmoil, how does this happen, right? So through the grace of God, again, supported, somebody told us of an insurance that would give to low income because she didn't have an income, she qualified. And so we got her insurance and she was bumped through network. It was just, again, it happened so fast between that call that she was taken to the ER to getting released to me being in Houston. It was within 7 days that we got her insurance, but it was the most stressful time. One of them, I'll tell the second most stressful time, but one of the most stressful time of just like, how does this happen, right? So we get her into treatment, and Karen battles cancer for a year, and she loses her life to cancer. So that was our first big blow. And I share it because what my reaction to grief was, well, death happens, move on. And everybody kept telling me, be strong, be strong. So I took that to heart, like, be strong. And I went right back to work 2 weeks after we buried her and pretended like it was fine. I wasn't fine, but I didn't know how to express it. Keep in mind, grew up in a Latino family, work very hard, you just get shit done. There is no room for emotion, no room for breakdowns. And I was paddling to keep my head above water, but I didn't know how to process what was going on. I didn't know how to process. So that led into anxiety, that led into depression. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's not a good space to be, you know, and I don't say that from a judgment standpoint. I say that it is definitely a dark, dark time to be in that space. So 15 months later, my sister, we're all going through our existential crisis. My other sister, the third oldest, Raquel, she at this point had decided to move to Korea to be an English teacher. This is her fulfilling her dreams. She at this point is about early 30s, and she thinks she's missed out on all her 20s. Again, you know, perspective. She thinks her life is over. And I'm like, no, I'm like, oh my God, like, you know, when you're closer to 40 into your 50s, they're like, I still got a lot to live.
Yeah.
Back
Yeah.
then, it just seems so she was very hard on herself. And I happened to go visit her in Korea, and the day before I was going to come back, she and I both had a couple of drinks. She got very intoxicated, and that night she actually took her life. So she died by suicide, which was the second worst, most horrible thing that's ever happened. And the shock of ¿qué pasó? ¿Por qué? Why? The questions and the way in which I was just like, what? And again, separate, the universe supports you. I cannot tell you how many people, the teachers that she worked with, rolled up their sleeves and helped me through that process, because it was the whole works of, okay, I called my dad and I was like, I don't even know what I said, but I was just like, pasó algo, and he's like, no digas nada, yo sé. Like, he knew, and we didn't have to express it. And he goes, nomás tráela. And that was my mandate, to bring her body back. So 15 months later, we're burying my sister, and that was February 2014. It's been 8 years that she passed. And that's what led to the end of volume 2 of my life, where the questions really became, okay, you can't just go back to work and pretend you got your shit together. That's why I love this podcast, because I had to get my shit together. I couldn't pretend life was okay. No, it wasn't. It was hard. And I had really had a real loss, in terms of, one was I could justify in a weird way, like, oh, she had cancer, it wasn't her choice. But when somebody decides to take their life, it really makes you question, like, what state they're in. And separate, I could understand her depression, because I had been there. I hadn't been depressed enough to make that action, but I could understand that darkness, because it was heavy. And it leads me to chapter 3 of, I had to roll up my sleeves and start asking, okay, Diana, let's get real with this grief. Let's get real with this loss. Let's get real with life. And those questions are, I don't think many give ourselves permission to ask those questions, but if you do, wow, that could be transformative. Wow, to really own your life and say, hey, this has happened. That when all that happened, I think I was 29 as I reflect. Yeah, I was about to turn 30. So I was about to hit my 30s. And everything I had done, the work hard, the check the box, the get the promotions, yes, they were nice. And yes, in paper, I did the things, but it wasn't what my life was about. It wasn't. It wasn't.
Oh my goodness, amiga. This is heavy stuff.
Yes.
You really, I mean, I see you today, you would never know that this is what you went through. And obviously now in your chapter 3, it's like you're taking everything, all these experiences, and helping women, helping people out there, because you know exactly, especially with I mean, in my opinion, the passing of your sister Raquel,
Yes.
how that, I mean, how can we normalize that people need help, like really need help, and people don't want to say anything, because of fear. There's all these things. I mean, depression and anxiety are very dark and real. I know that. I mean, thank God that I've gotten out of those dark spaces. But it's, how can we normalize that, we go to, a health coach to get us lean and fit, but yet we're so embarrassed to ask for help in therapy, mental therapy. I can just honestly, I'm in awe of who you are. And how did you get yourself out of that?
Thank you. Yes, I think that was the big turning point. Is I remember that between my first sister passing and my second, between Karen and Raquel, that, and then like it was a year later, so collectively it had been total of 3 years from Karen passing, and then in between Raquel at 3 years later, and I was so depressed, and I just was in my bed in the weekend, and mind you, I was operating fully at work. I don't think people knew, like they didn't. I wasn't admitting, I wasn't sharing. And part of the normalizing is sharing our story, because I don't share it for, one, it is therapeutic to share. And two, I want people to know that these are real things. We are still in the pandemic. So many people have lost loved ones. It's not grief is not a pain I wish on anybody. And yet it is something that we will experience if we love somebody. And many of us, unfortunately, will, of course, different times, right? We don't know when. But it's important to talk about this because we are going to experience it. So what happens when we do experience it? So coming back, how did I get out? This is again where I just feel the universe comes in and supports you. And I remember being in bed in a weekend, and I distinctly looked outside my bedroom window, and I just heard the birds chirping so loud. And I thought, okay, they're like distinctly chirping. Like, why are they like, they weren't like going away. And I was like, huh. And then I just remember thinking, and this, I don't know how the thought came, but I thought, God, just send me a life coach. That was it. I didn't say send me to therapy. I had gone to therapy. I wasn't feeling that I was making progress. But I said, send me a life coach. And a week later, and out of all the places, I meet my mentor, and she is a 5-time cancer survivor.
Oh, wow.
And she said, and I was like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a cancer coach, is specifically what she said. And I was like, how did you become a cancer coach? Like, I was just like a life coach, but for cancer. She's like, yeah, I help patients, I help survivors. And she's chirpy. You think I'm chirpy? She's chirpy.
Wow.
And she's like, oh, it's because I'm a 5-time cancer survivor. And I just loved the way she could say that with grace and honor. And I knew I needed a piece of what she was eating. I was like, what are you having for breakfast? I need to eat what you're eating. And again, it was the thought that came, the prayer, and then knowing that there were no accidents. That was not an accident. And I still work with her. I got trained through her program. She's still a mentor. I work with her on Cancer Journey Institute. I'll give a shout out. And it's just, these are the things that in the darkest times, there are resources, there is support, there is help. And if you don't know where to go, there is a thing called google.com that you can Google anything.
Right.
And if that's not your jam, go to YouTube. And if that's not your jam, hashtag on Instagram. It really isn't that alone when you give yourself permission.
Yes. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. Give yourself permission.
Yes.
And I think we as Latinas don't do that.
Mm-mm.
We don't. We're not taught to give ourselves permission.
I think that as Latinas, we're taught to give and make sure everybody around us is safe. We don't know how to give to us. And I really am a proponent on let's put on our oxygen mask first.
Absolutely. I keep preaching that to everybody. I'm like, I feel like we should be selfish. Like if we complete ourselves, then we can pour over to other people.
Absolutely.
Whereas as being Latina, that's not the concept that we grow up with. It's like, no. Primero todos los demás, tú al último.
Yeah.
And
sacrificio.
It's like that's indoctrinated in our DNA.
Absolutely.
Like, for you to put yourself first, what? Who are you? Who do you think you are?
Absolutely.
So I'm so happy that you're saying this. So, amiga, wow. So you have this mentor and you transition out of marketing completely, like,
Yeah.
so now you have your business as
Yes.
a life coach. And
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit what do you do? Because I know that part of, from our talk before, it's like, there's all these mother wounds. And I really want to
Yes.
tap into that because if anything, you know. So
Yeah.
please tell us, how is it
Yeah.
that our mother wounds, we carry this throughout our lives?
Absolutely. Well, let me share that when I met my mentor and worked with her and started to get deep, like no more, like I just got obsessed, and I love to master things. I have this, like, I need to stop sometimes because I just go deep. But I was like swimming in the dark cloud for 3 years. I met my mentor. Within 6 months, my life changed. Like I met her in October, and I remember by that March, I was like, I feel good. Like I could talk about it. I wasn't ashamed about it. I started to share at work that had felt depressed, that I had felt anxiety. Like that's how I knew it wasn't it. Like I say, it's not that grief goes away. It's you learn to dance with that journey, and it learns to you take control over it. It loosens its grip on you. So for me, I just got obsessed with, like, how did life coaching work? Why didn't therapy work as effectively? And I like to do things fast too. So that's my other thing. I'm like very impatient, but I just got so obsessed with how this was such an effective medium for me. And I realized, well, we need more life coaches. We need to be talking about this. And I feel that, this is 5 years ago at this point, or going on 6. I don't life coaching, maybe because now I'm in the field, I see life coaches everywhere, but I don't remember it being a thing back then. I don't know how you feel about that, but for me, what I realized that there's pockets in coaching women. I inherently coach women. I do coach men, actually. I actually have like 30% male clients, which is awesome. What I've realized, and some of the common themes, is that how we respond to life and life circumstances is a lot, almost all of it, based on our upbringing and based on our relationships with our parents. And for my dad, he's a non-emotional, doesn't talk about it, but he'll have his little drink on the weekend. So I knew I picked up on those tendencies in my early 20s. With my mom, I realized that there was nurturing that I was craving, which is why the loss of my sister was so difficult, because they provided that space that my mother didn't. Now, I'm at a place where I understand that my mom did the best that she could. She learned from her own mother. So these wounds that are with the mom and with father, but really with mom, especially as women, when we come back to think about how women are, Latinas are, like everybody else first, right? So in my mom's eyes, she did everything right by her because she was sacrificing to make sure everybody was financially, like hay comida en la casa, that was her motto. But the emotion piece, she just didn't know how to do that. And she got that from her mother. So when we realize, oh my gosh, I have this deep stuff of how, for me, I needed nurturing. I needed to know I was loved. I never heard the words, I loved you, until my sister's passed. True story. I didn't hear those words. I didn't realize how that had affected me. That's the reason why when I first responded to grief, I just did the best thing I could, which was go work, because that's what I had seen from my parents. That's what I had seen from my mother. Sacrifice yourself, go work. And so it's not just the mother wound, it's also the generation that you're really working with or working against, however you want to look at it. But what I do know is that and I've seen this common thread consistently with all the women I've coached, what I do know is that when we give ourselves permission to heal that mother wound, which some of it requires sometimes boundaries, sometimes that requires saying no to mom, sometimes that might be actually putting physical distance, not always answering the phone when it's a hectic, panic call. Like so many of my clients tell me how their moms call them and say, no me muerto, you know, and you're like, okay, thanks, right? It's that like passive aggressive condescending statement when really you're like, okay, you miss me, but you don't know how to say that, so you're going to make me feel guilty. There's so much of that to unpack. But what I realize is when we give ourselves permission, put those boundaries and heal, put on our oxygen mask, then we can move into a space of compassion, understand where they're coming from, and realize, okay, it's not about me. It's not. They're on their journey too, but we got to put on our oxygen mask.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think many amigas out there will resonate with this because, I mean, I've had so many conversations about, you know, there's this conflict between mom and daughter, and like always. And then it's like, I feel like I have a daughter and I don't want that conflict. I'm like, so I work on myself completely to heal those wounds, because I see sometimes the my mom in me, and I'm like, stop it, stop it. Stop it, because you know that's not what I want. No, that's not what I want. So it's we got to work through these things, because you know, if we don't stop it, it's just going to continue. It's kind of like the cycle, right? It's a cycle.
It reminds me of a coach that I had once who just said it in a way that resonated, which is, when you heal, it's an honor because you're breaking those generational change from your past and your future. And you chose this. And I'm very much into universal growth and soul plans, and that there's purpose and meaning. And I really do believe that. Like, I don't think we're just like an earth being. I do believe we live and we have a purpose as a soul. And when she said that, I was like, yeah, like I am changing something very different in this lineage. And that is an honor to me. That is an honor. And oh, by the way, I chose my mom. Whoa, she played her role really good. Like, she really, what we set out to do, she did her part. And it's my turn to do my part too, putting on my oxygen mask.
Yeah. And you know how we had that discussion is like, I know that I chose my mom. And I know that I'm like, oh my God, like when that concept was introduced, I thought, really? Why?
Totally. Been there too.
Really? Why?
Yeah.
But you know, as you get older and wiser, you start to understand, I see why. I needed that for whatever situation happened at that point in time. Right. So, this is a beautiful conversation. My goodness. And I can't even believe it's already like been 40 minutes. Oh, amiga. Well, you know what, I mean, thank you so much for that. And, you know, I always ask my guests, you know, if they could provide like a tip or two on how an amiga can handle her shit. Cause girl, you've been handling it.
Yes, I love this question, and I wrote it down, so I'm going to read it because I didn't want to forget exactly what I want to say. The first tip is, amiga, own your story and acknowledge what you've been through and where you are right now. And I remember, quick story. I had a friend of mine, Latino, first generation, and he applied to an Ivy League school for business school. And his application is like, oh, I have a traditional Latino story. And I was like, no, you got to own your story. We got to own our story. And I think it's a little sad that we're not owning our stories, because we are here to make an impact. So the first way we start to make an impact is by owning our story. So now I want to go into a practical tip of how to own your story. And if you're not in the position or don't feel safe yet to own your story, you can start by simply journaling and writing down everything that you've been through. And when you look back, even a month from now or a year from now, and look at that story and what you read, and then you can reflect and say, wow, I've been through a lot, and look at where I am now. That's power. That's power. So gain your power back.
Yes, I love that. Absolutely. And you're right. Like, we undermine our
Yes.
stories.
Mhm.
Because it's like, oh, it's typical. Oh yeah, first generation, whatever, immigrant, it's like, aren't we all the same? But no, even
No.
that in itself is not the same.
Yeah.
Like, so, oh, I love this, amiga. You own your story and journal. And I'm a big proponent of journaling because it's in writing
Yes.
that there's this release,
Yes.
this amazing release.
Therapeutic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you so much
Thank
for these
you.
amazing tips because, and let me tell you something. Not one amiga and I've had 70 now episodes, they're all different. Their tips are so different. Isn't that incredible? And the
Amazing.
majority are Latinas.
Yeah.
So, amigas, own your story. Own your story. Thank you so much, Diana, for being here with us at Amiga Handle Your Shit podcast.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.